which is very scary, which is very dangerous, which is trying to erase our voice. And I remember the time periods before our voice was even in print. I remember being in school here on the west side of San Antonio, searching through the textbooks to see some mention of our culture, our community, and seeing nothing. Searching so much that even through high school and into college, I was having to dig really deep to find anything related to our culture. You could find some things on Mexico, maybe, a few, or something on Spain, or maybe something on France, because it was right next to Spain. Pero eran contaditos. Our experience was not documented. We were starved for a reflection of ourselves in the mirror. I remember what it was like to not own our voices, our own voices, to not be able to speak el español, el idioma de nuestras casas, de nuestras abuelas, de nuestras madres, the language that was forbidden, that was called dirty, that was called ugly by state mandate. How could that be? I remember Maria Guadalupe Soriano, who sat right in front of me in science class, because we were always seated alphabetically, you know, R and then S and then T, and she was S and I was D. And I remember Mrs. Price talking to us about how an A here at Rhodes Junior School is only worth a C at Alamo Heights. And how we all felt like no matter how good we got, we couldn't be anything better than mediocre. And I remember her saying, now don't you let me catch you speaking Spanish. Spanish is a dirty language. But louder than her sassy voice was the whisper that came from right in front of me as Maria Guadalupe Soriano so subtly turned her head over her shoulder and whispered, my mother speaks Spanish. My grandmother speaks Spanish. My mother and my grandmother are not dirty. And the lull, the echo of the lull that went across the room as everybody, nice and subtle, nodded their heads, and Mrs. Price thought we were agreeing with her. Remembering that, and remembering also the Chicano movement, when we discovered our voices, when we found books, like one that I still have with an Antonia Castañeda, author on the back with long dark hair, obviamente mexicana, with a book of Chicano literature. Man, I carried that thing around so much. I'm glad it was a hardback, or it probably would have disintegrated by today. But those books meant so much. It was a time period of celebration. It was joy. It was a time of finding our voices again, of saying, this is who we are. It's hard to describe even the magic of that sense of self-empowerment. So the other night, I had been asked by Dorinda Moreno, who also wrote one of the early books in Chicano literature, La Mujer en Pie de Lucha. And she's still working away, organizing a lot of groups that are trying to reinstate our literature in Arizona. And she said, Carmen, could you send us a poem about the Libro Traficantes movement, this group that went from Houston through San Antonio and El Paso and Albuquerque to Tucson to take books back to them, Mexican-American books. You know, let's remember that this image of us as smugglers, as narcotraficantes, has to be redone as libro traficantes. We're smuggling books. We're smuggling not wetbacks, but wet books back into Arizona. And she said, you know, your books were part of this, and you read and did things, you know, here at the Guadalupe. As for that group of libro traficantes, would you write a poem about it or send us a poem about it? It was very late at night, and these images started coming to me. So I'm going to share it with you. It's very new. It's not polished. Poets will tell you that you write a poem, and then you come back and you polish it a little bit. You sand it down. You cut out some words. You replace words. You redo and redo and redo until it It shines. So you're going to get it unshiny and raw, but this is the poem I sent her. It's called Ocupando mi voz, occupying my voice. A spreading of full-bodied wings, moist with afterbirth and heavy, unfolding stiffly, tentatively, then eagerly, shedding dark paths and cramped confines. That's what the rebirth felt like. A jubilation of our voices, singing flight. Behind us, the blood in our lungs, taste of conquest, the silencing of tongues, mutilation of spirit, the victor's spoils, sign branded on our foreheads, visible on our skin and our names on our lips. But oh, the dance of liberation, sprouted from our very core. From every line, our history bloomed. The power of words to redefine our lives. The power of story to reclaim who we are, what we can be. It was only 30, 40 years ago, this Renaissance. Hardly enough time to lay these bricks of books along a path. And then the dry dust of conquest settles once more in the hollow of my throat. Shadows of silence scream with no tongue. The ownership of what was ours has passed into new hands. Yet those new hands should know we will not bend our backs and fade into the branded scars, for we have occupied our voice, our bodies, our beings, burnt the deeds of ownership, sung the dance, and spread the wings. We have occupied the books, the hands, the eyes, the lines, and we are there forever around you, invisible and loud. Ojalá que no se ofendan de este próximo, but I don't think this group is the kind that have to worry about ofendiéndose. And it's in a young adult and adult collection, so it's not that offensive, except if you're very strict in your views about what we should talk about and what we shouldn't. This is a very, very short little piece of prose about owning your own life, and it's based on the life of a friend of mine, Barbara Salas, who lived it, and I just wrote it down. I wrote it down as a list of mistakes. It's called, the title's almost longer than the story, How I Got Into Big Trouble and the Mistakes I Made in Increasing Order of Importance. Mistake number one. First, I fell in love with my priest. That was enough right there, but then I made mistake number two. Mistake number two, I told my parents that I fell in love with my priest. My parents got very mad. Mistake number three, I told my priest that I fell in love with my priest. He already knew. Told me he was in love with me too. My parents told me it was all my fault. Mistake number four, we tried to figure out a way to make it work. Asked the church if he could leave the priesthood to get married. Waited for permission. They didn't give it. He left anyway. We got married by a judge. My parents quit talking to me. Mistake number five, asked the church what we could do to have a full church wedding. They said it wasn't possible. Asked if they could at least give the marriage their blessing. They said it wasn't possible. Asked if they could give a sort of kind of half blessing. Asked every week for 8 months solid, and finally they figured out a way. But we had to promise to tell no one, and the church records were sealed in confidentiality. Got our half blessing. My parents said that 19-year-old muchachas locas should never be allowed in the congregations of 30-year-old attractive single priests. I just shrugged my by then pregnant shoulders and said I didn't know any priests who weren't single. They ignored me. Mistake number six, we kept thinking we needed to do the right thing and be married fully in the eyes of the church. The church made us fill out 1,000 forms and talk to 100 officials and make 10,000 separate vows, including that we would never tell anyone. We didn't, except for my parents. My parents started talking to me again, but probably just because their 1-year-old granddaughter was already part of the wedding party. Mistake number seven, tried to celebrate our anniversary. We had had by then 3 different wedding dates and 2 children. The children were a lot less confusing than the wedding dates. One of the weddings had been so secret that we couldn't even remember the date of it anymore. Oh well, happy anniversary anyway, whenever it is. My parents at least agree that he's a very good man. They've always loved a priest. It's me that they're not sure about. Mistake number 8. He tried to find a job. It's not that he didn't have talents galore, it's just that I kept asking, well, what would you like to do? And what he would like to do was be a priest. Manager of a Kmart couldn't compare. For 3 years after I'd finished my nursing degree, he was even a house husband. Did a great job and the kids were delighted. He sewed up down jackets on the sewing machine and repaneled the den, but underneath he knew it was a job on a mommy track and a sure thing dead end once they graduated. Mistake number 9, they graduated. He turned to drink, lots of it. Just beers and social settings to start with, but sopping drunk, fog out, sprawled on the living room couch at the end. I'd get home from work and they'd get home from college and the smell of wine would hit us at the front door. Just reliving the transubstantiation of Christ in communion over and over again, I guess. My parents started patting me on the back, saying things like, "Be strong, mija," and lighting candles for me. Mistake number 10. I went to church and heard a sermon about the evils of overindulgence and the selfishness of intoxication. Got tired of never being able to use my living room couch. Told my parents that I was getting a divorce. They put out their candles and decided to quit trying to understand me. Maybe I was just born bad. Mistake number 11. No more. Quit counting. This is my life. Come on, I'm serious. I married a patient of mine. Wonderful man with a kind heart. Kind heart, but weak heart. In fact, he was waiting for a heart transplant. We didn't even try for the church. Married in the hospital where I work. He was still in the hospital bed. Signed 2 pieces of paper, just take the marriage and go. But this time, I remember my anniversary with no problem. And we celebrated every month. Mija, that man could die at any minute. You're making a big mistake. No, Mama, no more mistakes. I'm the judge, I'm the jury, I'm the church, and I'm